So 7th point nene odidra, any doubts banta? Any questions from the 7th knot that we studied yesterday? There are no questions, we will go to the 8th knot. Turmana, 8th knot. Our craving now brings us to the 8th knot. The entire scene now is changed. The conditions which has been experienced in the 7th knot come to view now in the more subtle form. Here the Abhyasi feels that the world is like a dream or the playground of nature. The sense of dissociation or attack or unattachment, the Vairagya, becomes very strong. This is called as Para Vairagya. So the Vairagya becomes refined and even more stronger. That's hence it is called as a higher Vairagya or Para Vairagya. Beyond it, even Vairagya as it is has no access, for it changes its form and then only it can be taken as fully matured. Everything here seems to be very light. Thoughts lose its weight and the Abhyasi begins enjoying peace and settledness. This blissful state of peace is in due course transformed into reality. But dear brethren, a real seeker is he who all along with his state of tranquility feels a restless craving for the realization of the ultimate. It is in fact the very thing which removes thorns and thistles from our path and facilitates our march onwards. So what is the thing that is going to remove excessive thoughts and thistles from our path? Andre? It is the restless craving for the realization of the ultimate. So you'll ನೋಡಿ ಏನೇನು ಬರುತ್ತಿಲ್ಲಿ the Abhyasi feels that the world is like a dream or the playground of nature. That's the first thing that you get. A sense of dissociation or unattachment, Vairagya, becomes more stronger. Then thought loses its weight and Abhyasi begins enjoying peace and settledness. So idistu kudanu agutte. Then, but we have to have the restless craving to go towards the realization, because that is what clears our path. We have persistently been hearing that the world is like a dream and that we should take it to be so. But to my mind, those bookworms themselves have never been able to visualize it in that light, though the preachers have ever been emphasizing it vigorously. As a matter of fact, it is an inner condition which blooms automatically by the effect of the right practice when one reaches up to it, which is up to the 8th point. When we reach up to the 8th point, we then start feeling that the world is like a dream or the playground of nature. If we force our mind to accept it as such, it will be mere hoax, far, far away from reality. It is in fact the conditions of a particular place which a pilgrim on the path comes across during the course of his journey. If we harden these feelings through artificial means and thereby draw the conclusion that we have acquired knowledge and that we have actually realized the world as a dream, it will be highly deceptive. The characteristic feature of the place is peace. So 8th point alone is peace is there. And merging in it means that we have absorbed it fully. When we emerge out of it, to attain identicality, we gain full experience of the condition. In this state, we feel a sort of freshness like that, which a sun-stricken person would feel after a cool bath in the river in hot summers. So, bisilally, you are in the hot summers, and you cannot tolerate the sunlight, but after that you go and take a cool bath. That way, how it will be like. There is a feeling of freshness that you feel. After you've been exposed to very bright sunlight, you go and take a cool bath. So there is a feeling of freshness. So two characteristic features of the 8th point is the peace and the freshness. Now, when we have attained identicality, which in other words mean living in the life of that place, the condition that develops after merging further into that living beings too, to us the happy tidings of our approach to the next point. In other words, we move to the next knot, the 9th knot. We now enter the 9th knot. The form of experience changes further, and we now come to the point where from the real contact with the Bhuma or the absolute starts. Please underline this. So, ಯಾವ point ಅಲ್ಲಿ Bhuma, at what point that the contact with the Bhuma starts? At the 9th point. we enter a state in which we feel born into a new world. Our expansion in it begins now, and along with it, we also gain consciousness of that too, whom the sphere we are now born belongs to. So it is a sphere of the divine that we are born into. So we start gaining the consciousness of that also, the divine. Our feeling brings us to a conscious understanding of it, and the mind recognizes the presence of the Lord. His presence impresses the Abhyasi so deeply that unconscious worship starts within. So you now develop contact with the Bhoma. It's almost like as if born into a new world. You become aware of the presence of the Lord, and then your unconscious worship of the Lord starts. Individual activities of the worldly nature get almost exhausted before coming to this stage, and the relationship between the master and the devotee remains to view. He is the master, and we are his devotees. Is a predominant feeling at this knot, together with a reverential consciousness of his presence. So reverential and the devotional consciousness, devotional awareness of his presence, and we are aware of our roles, that he is the master, we are the devotees. Our own state at this stage is of the extreme supplication with an inexpressible softness of heart, marking the total absence of all feelings of ill will and enmity. At this time, we don't have any feelings of ill will or enmity towards anybody. This, in fact, opens us to a very first chapter of divine knowledge. From this point, the sense of self-existence begins to dissolve, and the more we probe into it, the more we are successful in the negation of the self. So from the ninth point onwards, as we go further and further, there is a further negation of the self. Until we enter into the 13th point, where the self is fully negated, and we enter into a state of living death. In other words, self-negation altogether, if self-negation has to occur, what needs to happen is the refinement in the layers of the ego, or the refinement of the ego. That's what needs to happen. So in other words, from the ninth point onwards up to the 13th point, what happens is refinement of the ego in multiple stages. You remember the 11 rings of ego? We start getting unentangled from each ring of the ego over a period of time. For further classification of the condition of the self in this stage, I may cite the example of Hanuman, whose inner powers were awakened only when he was reminded of their presence in him. Otherwise, he remained quite forgetful of them. That's why the ninth point is also called as the Hanuman point. But onward still, we have to go passing through the usual stages of merging and identicality at every point. When all these conditions get merged into the state of identicality, which in its turn reaches the merging point, we feel our happy approach to the next point. So I'll stop here. If there is anything, you can ask. So the 8th point is the state of surrender. 9th point is the Hanuman point. The state of insignificance. State of insignificance.
Brother, when they have reached the ninth point, ninth knot, we have crossed. Individually, how he will be, he or she will be behaving to the world like as it is.
They feel that they are the servant of humanity. They feel like dasa. So they will develop a great deal of humility. Okay. The humility is such that since the self is also kind of refined to a large extent, self-negation starts at this stage. So since the humility is now starting to develop to a higher degree, although the highest state of humility is when we go to 12th point. At the 9th point and the 8th point, the humility is further increasing. It's not reached the peak.
Oh.
At that stage of humility, we feel a sense of surrender to the master, and then we also have a devotional awareness of the master. But we are very clear in our mind that he is the master, we are the devotee. And we are so soft in our heart that we cannot feel any ill will or enmity towards anyone.
Okay. Then his defense, to the outside world, whatever that defense he has to do for his protection, all that awareness will be there for that Abhyasi?
Because you are now immersed in the devotion of the master.
Okay.
So where will you have time to become aware of the defects of others?
Correct. Okay.
ಸರಿನಾ? ಸರಿ, ಇನ್ನೇನು ಪ್ರಶ್ನೆ ಇದೆಯಾ?
Hello.
ಹೇಳ್ರಿ.
So, brother, like, is it possible that Abhyasi will know in which point? Of course, if they're sensitive, they will know. But if they're not sensitive, so how will they know, brother?
You will need to develop sensitivity to know the conditions that you are passing through. It's only by knowing about the conditions that you pass through, you can work out the knots that you are in. The movements, the vibrations, the colors, they are not definitive indicators of the point that you are moving in or the chakra that has been opened up. The definitive evidence of a chakra having opened up is the conditions that you pass through. That's why we are emphasizing on all these points, that these are the conditions that you feel at this particular point. If you feel these conditions, then you can reasonably understand that the work is occurring at that particular point. But you have to feel this point, these conditions without any effort. You should not imagine these conditions. But there are many times when we can err because we always give extra marks to ourselves. So we need to get a confirmation of that reading or whatever we feel from the perceptor also. And that should also show up in our behavior. So 3 evidences: our own experience tallied with that of the perceptor, and our behavior also in line with the experience. When we have all these 3 experiences, then you can be sure. Fourthly, when we become very much deeply identical with the conditions of a particular point, then not only we can feel the condition, others around us also can feel the condition. They will make a comment about it. So that is what happens. So these are the 4 evidences that you look for: your own experience, the changes in your behavior, corroboration by the perceptor, and 4th one is our influence on the others. All these 4 states gives us the evidence that yes, whatever our reading was, it is also most likely to be right. Okay. Along with that, there are other evidences also, which I don't want to go into as of now, but there are other evidences also that we shall discuss. For example, Vairagya and Paravairagya. As the Vairagya matures, the idea of Vairagya also just disappears from your mind. You are naturally having the state of Vairagya without being aware of the Vairagya. So that is what happens when you come to the end of the 8th point and you come into the 9th point. At the end of the 8th point, the idea of Vairagya or the awareness of the Vairagya also disappears. Okay? Okay. Shall we move on now?
ಬ್ರದರ್ ಕೆಲವು ಪ್ರಶ್ನೆಗಳಿದೆ. 7th ಪಾಯಿಂಟ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಡೀಪೆಸ್ಟ್ ಎಂಡ್ ಆಫ್ ಬ್ರಹ್ಮಾಂಡ ದೇಶ್ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳ್ತಾರೆ, ಸುಪ್ರಾ ಮೆಂಟಲ್ ಸ್ಫಿಯರ್. 6ನೇ ಪಾಯಿಂಟ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಸುಪ್ರಾ ಮೆಟೀರಿಯಲ್ ಸ್ಫಿಯರ್, ಇದು ಸುಪ್ರಾ ಮೆಂಟಲ್. ಬಟ್ ಪರಬ್ರಹ್ಮಾಂಡ ಅಂತಾನೆಲ್ಲ ಹೇಳಲ್ಲ, ಬಟ್ ಇಟ್ ಇಸ್ ಪರಬ್ರಹ್ಮಾಂಡ ಮೆಂಟಲ್, ಸಾರಿ ಪರಬ್ರಹ್ಮಾಂಡ ಪ್ರದೇಶ. ಡೀಪೆಸ್ಟ್ ಎಂಡ್ ಆಫ್ ಬ್ರಹ್ಮಾಂಡ ದೇಶ್ ಈಸ್ ಪರಬ್ರಹ್ಮಾಂಡ, ಹೌದಲ್ವಾ ಬ್ರದರ್? I'm sorry, I'm speaking Kannada.
Deepest end of the Brahmanda, then crossing over the deepest end of the Brahmanda is Parabrahmanda. Parabrahmanda is a different sphere. It is not the end of the Brahmanda. After ending of the Brahmanda, you enter into the next sphere. That is Parabrahmanda.
But I thought Parabrahmanda starts in the 7th knot.
That is what
Am I wrong?
Correct.
So here it's a different language. So
exactly. So there is some slight difference between what you read here and what you read in spiritual anatomy. That is correct.
Okay, got it. So, thank you.
Just keep these differences in mind.
Okay. And the question here is, yesterday you alerted effect of matter still breathes in 7th. That was particularly that's because we have to track where the liberation is beginning.
I told you, up to the liberation, see, once you move into the Brahmanda Mandal, you are, what do you say? It's like qualification for liberation.
Got it.
It's like you get a degree certificate.
Got it.
That is a qualification for your job. Now, getting the degree certificate is no guarantee that you will get a job.
Yes.
Very similar. So when you come into Brahmanda, you get qualification for liberation. But there is no guarantee that you will get liberation. That is a different thing altogether. For the liberation, you increase your chances of getting a job with a degree certificate. That's why. Likewise, you increase your chances of liberation quite significantly by coming into the Brahmanda. Sixth point. But as long as the effect of the meteorite still lingers on in the sixth and the seventh point, early part of the seventh point, you can still go down and take a breath.
So, in the eighth knot, because the entire reality is only a dream, there is no effect of matter.
Correct. You have crossed over.
Okay. That means when Babuji is saying 2.5 circles, 1.5 circles is where we get the liberation. It is not yet here. It is moving towards that. But somewhere between 10 and 11 is where we can figure out, no, brother? That is what I wanted to say.
Allah.
Allah? Okay. Allah. Over to you on that point.
Second circle andre ಅಲ್ಲಿ ದೊಡ್ಡ ಡಾರ್ಕನ್ ಸರ್ಕಲ್ ಇದೆಯಲ್ಲ ಅದು
ಗೊತ್ತಾಯ್ತು.
ಸೊ ಸೆಕೆಂಡ್ ಸರ್ಕಲ್ ಇದೆಯಲ್ಲ, ಆ ಸೆಕೆಂಡ್ ಸರ್ಕಲ್ ಇದೆಯಲ್ಲ, ಆ ಮಧ್ಯದಲ್ಲಿ 1.5 ಅಂತಂದ್ರೆ ಬಿಟ್ವೀನ್ ಸೇ ಅರೌಂಡ್ ದ ಸೆವೆಂತ್ ಪಾಯಿಂಟ್ ಇದೆಯಲ್ಲ, ಇಟ್ಸ್ ಎ ವೆರಿ ವಾಸ್ಟ್ ರೀಜನ್. ಯು ಆರ್ ಅಸ್ಯೂಮಿಂಗ್ ದಟ್ ಅವ್ ಏನ್ ಸರ್ಕಲ್ ತರ ಬರೆದಿರಲ್ಲ ಎಲ್ಲ ಅಷ್ಟೇ ಇರುತ್ತೆ ಏರಿಯಾ ಅಂತ. ದೇರ್ ಆರ್ some regions which are huge actually. That's why Babuji writes that the seventh point you can go thousands of years around it. You can just be entangled in that only. So
that is the reason why I kept asking you, that kind of condition which Babuji Maharaj is talking about is actually in the seventh knot. Seventh circle, seventh knot. ಹೌದಾ ಇಲ್ವಾ? ಅವ್ರ ಲ್ಯಾಂಗ್ವೇಜ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ನಾನು ಇವಾಗ 1.5 ಸರ್ಕಲ್ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಬಿಟ್ವೀನ್ ದ ಸೆಕೆಂಡ್ ಸರ್ಕಲ್ ಅಂಡ್ ದ ಥರ್ಡ್ ಸರ್ಕಲ್ ಎಕ್ಸಾಕ್ಟ್ ಆಗಿ ಹಾಫ್ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಂಡ್ರೆ ಇಟ್ ಗೋಸ್ ಔಟ್ ಆಫ್ ವ್ಯೂ. ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಸಿಕ್ಸ್ತ್ ನಾಟ್ ಇನ್ ದಟ್
I just made a point which you did not grasp. Half ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದ ತಕ್ಷಣನೇ you are assuming that the areas are equal. I just made that the Brahmanda is, the Parabrahmanda is huge. The seventh knot is huge actually.
Got it.
So even when you say half, it might cover the area of half, but the circle could be just one half, not two circles.
Got it.
No, just remember that. In other words,
So
if you go by the descriptions, so sixth knot, seventh knot early stage ದಾಟಿದಾಗ material influence ಪೂರ್ತಿ ಹೊರಟೋದಾಗ, even the shadow of the material influence is now fully gone, then you can say that you have guaranteed liberation.
So for the question which may appear in the exam, at what point of time you get liberation?
Applied question ಎಲ್ಲ ಕೇಳಲ್ಲ, 7th 8th ಅಂತ. ಬಿಟ್ವೀನ್ ಫಸ್ಟ್ ಅಂಡ್ ಸೆಕೆಂಡ್ ಸರ್ಕಲ್ಸ್ ಹಾಫ್ ಅಂತ 1.5 ಸರ್ಕಲ್ಸ್ ಅಂತ ಏನ್ ಬರ್ದ್ರೆ ಆಯ್ತು, ಅದನ್ನೇ ಬರೆಯೋದು ಅಷ್ಟೇ
ಸಾಕು. ನಮ್ದು ಅರ್ಥ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಂಡಿರೋ ಡಿಸ್ಕ್ರಿಪ್ಷನ್ ಬರೆಯೋದು ಬೇಡ,
ಅದ್ ಬೇಕು ಅವ್ರು ಕೇಳೋದು.
ಥ್ಯಾಂಕ್ ಯು ಬ್ರದರ್, ಕ್ಲಾರಿಫೈಡ್. ಥ್ಯಾಂಕ್ ಯು ವೆರಿ ಮಚ್.
ಸರಿ ಕಣ್ರಿ, 10th knot ಹೋಗೋಣ. ಹಾಗಾದ್ರೆ when we reach this 10th knot, the previous conditions change their face. By now, you have become so much accustomed to the supplication that we begin feeling his home to be ours. Babuji Manili, there was a servant, maid servant. She had seen Babuji from a very young age. Although she was a maid in the house, she had so much authority in Babuji that she would scold Babuji. That's exactly the condition that we pass through. That we become so well versed with the state of God or the region of God that we begin feeling that his home is our home. That is to say, we begin to feel a sense of masterhood. We start feeling that like he is the master, we are also master. But this not being an imposition, it's an actual condition of the place, which develops by the effect of our close proximity with the Lord and which must come to an abhyasi at this level. ಇದು Ramakrishna Paramahamsa. At some point of time, there is an example where instead of, he says that he's going to worship the mother. But if you actually go to see him in the room, he's worshipping himself. So some people who observed him worshipping himself think that he's gone mad. So they come and complain to the temple authorities. But the temple authority knew that Ramakrishna Paramahamsa was a different kind of a person, divine person. So they tell him not to bother about it, just leave him alone. So this is like the 10th knot. And the 10th knot, you don't worship God anywhere because you feel the presence of God within you. You worship yourself. Just as on witnessing the gentle flow of the watery current, one often begins to feel the daunting of the dancing of the waves in his heart. So does an Abhyasi at this stage feel and is inwardly prompted to revere his own self. Putting it in another way, I may say that for enjoying the fine fragrance of the sandalwood, one has to go on to the tree itself, but when applies its paste on the forehead, he gets close to it and enjoys it in the same way. So rather than go and enjoy the smell of the sandalwood by going to the tree, you actually apply the sandalwood on your body and enjoy the smell of it. That's exactly what happens. In other words, you feel the presence of the sandalwood smell within by applying it. But that is external application. Here you feel the presence of the Lord within. So you start feeling that you are also the Lord. We are now at his portals and feel the cool breeze coming from within. The master too starts sensing that one of his devotees is in wait for him. Sameness also begins to develop to some extent, though much is yet to be covered in respect of closeness. Here the function of Ishwar in the sense of the creator ceases and the Ishwar has no access beyond. So 10th point only, the creator, the Ishwar, his access is ended. He does not have any access beyond that. The creator, the function of Ishwar, who is the sense of the creator. Onwards we begin to contact with the Bhuma, the absolute, and attain freedom from bondage. It is a place of rare approach. The air does not breathe here. Rather, the air at the place is of the type which is hardly attainable even after persistent labor and practice. And we might as well say that the air transforms into the real essence, which we have now to pass through. You remember the 5th point is air element. At the 10th point, the air now becomes its real essence. What is that essence? To call it as a vacuum may not be quite appropriate. To express it as a reflection of Bhuma may also not be exact, because all of these are comparatively heavier. In all fairness, it can only be said that the Bhuma is there and a conscious feeling of the existence of its existence is present in the heart, which determines that there is a certain eternal and universal existence toward which we have to move on. Then only we must understand that we have come up to the next knot. So the air becomes its real essence. That's all. What is the essence? You just feel the presence of the Bhuma and the conscious feeling of its existence is present in the heart. So which gives us a feeling that there is one constant, eternal and universal existence towards which we have to move. So at the 10th point, we start becoming aware of the eternal and universal existence. But we are yet not there, but we feel the presence of it. That's all.
Brother, in the 10th knot ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಈ ತರ ಈಶ್ವರ್ ಹ್ಯಾಸ್ ನೋ ಆಕ್ಸೆಸ್ ಬಿಯಾಂಡ್ ಅಂದ್ರೆ the Abhyasi who is there in the 10th knot, he has gone beyond Ishwar.
Correct. Ishwar, the creator, what the visible universe is, creation.
Okay.
Creation which is visible.
Okay.
Is gone beyond that. The creator.
Okay. Thank you.
ಇನ್ನೇನ ಪ್ರಶ್ನೆ ಇದೆಯಾ?
Brother, the air does not breathe there.
ಗೊತ್ತಾಗಲಿಲ್ಲ ಏನಿದೆ?
The air does not breathe there. Rather,
ಗಾಳಿ ಆಡಲ್ಲ. ಗಾಳಿ is now gone into its essence. When the air has gone into its essence, there is no question of any movement there. You just feel the presence of the essence, but you don't feel the presence of air there. Air is more heavier. We have left. In fact, it is true for most of the other points also. If you take the first point, is the earth element. If you move to the sixth point, the materiality is gone to a large extent. In other words, the earth as element has acquired its essence form. Likewise, the second point is space element. The space will come to its essence form in the seventh point. Third is fire element. The fire comes to its essence form in the eighth point. Fourth is water element. The water comes into its essence in the ninth point. In the 10th point, the air comes into essence because the fifth point is the air element. So, ಕೆಳಗಡೆ 5 elements ಬರುತ್ತಲ್ವಾ, the same 5 elements that you have in the first 5 points, its essence form is there in the next 5 points. That's all it is. Although he has clearly mentioned it separately here, but it applies for all the other 5 points also, for all other 5 elements also. Okay.
So basically, brother, if the matter is there in the first 5 circles, the seed of that matter is in the next 5 circles.
Not necessarily the seed, the finer, subtler essence of the matter is there. The subtler aspect of the matter is there.
Got it.
Not the seed, the subtler essence. What you say, subtler material of the matter is there.
But the seed of that.
Seed alla.
But the
ಎಲ್ಲದಕ್ಕೂ seed ಹಾಕ್ಬೇಡಿ. Don't use the word seed for everything. So I'm trying to clarify. Don't go back to the seed. If you want to hold on to the seed, you can hold on. But you asked a question, I'm clarifying.
Okay.
Grosser elements are there in the lower 5 points. Subtler state of the same grosser elements is there in the next 5 points. So just remember that. Subtler states of the same elements.
Nanna prashne, it is tagged to another question. They say everything that comes into the zone.
Shall we do one thing? It is becoming a monologue between you and me. Because what I am seeing is that there are multiple questions. Only one person is getting. Good to see that you are getting a lot of questions. That is good actually. But it's actually becoming a monologue between us. So my suggestion is, you ask one question and there are other questions relating to that. We can clarify that later on. In a different platform or between the two of us. That will be easier. But you can keep the questions.
Done, brother.
What is going to happen is that it will become a dialogue between both of us. You will ask some question, I'll answer. You will ask some question, I'll answer. That's all that will happen. So just keep that in mind. That perspective also in mind. That's all.
Got it, brother. But it may miss the point for the exams also.
No, not necessarily. At the level that you are actually asking for, they will not go to that depth in the exams. This will be good for your understanding, not necessarily good for your exams. No,
got it.
It will not go to that level.
Got it.
Examly, puskadalli, whatever is present in the book, more closely related to that only they'll ask. They are unlikely to ask derivative questions, which is more based on our understanding. Especially points, generally they don't ask much about these points between the 7th to 12th. Points they don't ask much about these points. But it is necessary for the sake of understanding. It's only for that point of view. I'm just covering in a bit more detail. But not necessarily from the perspective of the exams.
Understood then. It's easy there.
Okay, so it will be far more easier. Don't worry.
Thank you.
Whatever questions you have got, my suggestion is please write it up and keep it in one file. So we can all clarify it when we get a chance. See, once we have finished all these readings, we will have time. We will hold one session and then we can have this discussion. And if everybody else also wants to listen, let them do so. Because then the examination will be out of the way.
Got it.
You got the point? So I'm just keeping a slight focus on the exams. That's all.
Got it, brother. Go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah.
So 11th point. Having accomplished this, we may now step into the 11th point. Off goes the wheel and the vision of the reality now comes to light. So at the 10th point, you remember, at the first 5 points, you crossed the gross Maya. In the next 5 points, you have now crossed the subtler Maya also, you have now crossed. So that's why Babuji is writing, the wheel is now taken off. Off goes the wheel and the vision of the reality now comes to light. We now feel helpless and beyond control. A constant craving for him, accompanied by its all aches and pangs, prevails every moment. There is no rest or peace without him. So at the 11th point, we are able to see the presence of feel the presence of the reality directly, even without any wheel. At the 10th point, you could feel the presence of the reality, but it was covered with the wheel. But at the 11th point, the wheel is taken off. You experience the vision of the reality directly. But you are not very close to reality, but you are able to see the reality. It's almost like you are so far off, you are able to see the sea. You are not near the sea as yet. You are not in the water of the sea as yet. But you are able to see the sea far off right in front of you. That's how it is at the 11th point. You are able to see the vision of the reality right in front of you, but it's kind of still far off. So what will happen when we see the sea right in front of us, but at a distance? What do we generally feel? We generally feel like running towards the water. We feel restless and we want to reach the water, the shore of the water very fast. So many times we actually run towards the shore and towards the waves of the water. Exactly the same thing occurs at the 11th point. You have the vision of the reality, the wheel is taken off. Now you feel you are beyond your control. A constant craving for him, accompanied by the aches and pangs, takes over. There is no rest or peace without him. So without actually going and touching the water, you don't feel any rest or peace. So here you want to go and feel and experience the divinity, the reality. So you want to go very fast. So there is no rest or peace. Here you have extreme restlessness. This is what Daji writes at the 11th point. What remains instead may better be expressed as a condition of peace from which peacefulness is sucked out. That is exactly the condition of the knot which we experience and we get finally merged into it. So underline that point. Peace from which peacefulness has been sucked out. That is the condition of the 11th point. There is the vision of reality, the wheel is taken off, and you feel extremely restless without him, without the reality. What remains there now? Everything seems to be lost except the pang, which persists still and which is the only thing that helps us on our onward march. It ends when we have plunged into the reality and moved on into the state of identicality. When that too is merged, we come to a state of refined identicality, which marks our approach to the 12th point. So at the 11th point, you feel so restless that you want to go towards reality very fast. So extreme restlessness is there. At the 12th point, now we arrive at the 12th point. What is there? It is the merging point of all the things acquired at the different stages of merging and identicality. You remember, at every point, we acquire different conditions. Now, all these conditions merge together into one uniform condition at the 12th point. It is like all the 12 rivers from different points merge into the ocean at the 12th point. They merge into, become one thing like the ocean. We now enter automatically into the state of refined identicality or sayujjata, where the panorama is so much vested with purity that even simplicity may seem to be 100 times heavier. So what is there at the 12th point? There is settledness, there is simplicity, there is purity, there is love, and there is humility. All these 5 things peak at the 12th point. Babuji is now saying there are 5 things: simplicity, purity, love, humility, and extreme lightness. These are the things that persist. Now Babuji is saying the simplicity is like 1,000 times heavier than the purity. So he is now comparing between those 4 or 5 characters that we develop at the 12th point, one against another. There we actually start becoming so subtler that you get refined identicality. So this is one question that you might get in the exam. Where do you get refined identicality? The answer is the 12th point. And what is refined identicality? Because identicality is sarupyata. Refined identicality is sayujjata. Now please underline this. He is actually written this here. Refined identicality or sayujjata. Now at other points what we read, identicality is sarupyata. Now here he is calling that refined identicality as sayujjata. If any other more appropriate word may have been available to denote the condition further on, that too must be many times heavier than even the simplicity. Now we proceed on with refined identicality and begin to perceive a new form of existence which comes to our experience at the next knot. A new existence comes to our view, and that is the 13th knot, at the 13th knot. Okay? As we reach his 13th knot, we begin to feel existence all through, an eternal existence. So now, we no longer feel that we are this embodied life. We feel that we eternally exist. So we now have a glimpse of our eternal existence. I have taken up only the major knots because the minor ones are innumerable and their difference is beyond words. So far, words have somehow struggled on to express, but they are henceforth helpless. Still, our pilgrimage continues. Numberless such knots come in our way, and we pass through the conditions of merging and identicality, achieved one of them. Maya loses its touch even before we enter into the 13th knot. So is the case of with egoism. So 13th knot enter ಆಗೋಷ್ಟರಲ್ಲಿ egoism ಹೊರಟೋಗುತ್ತೆ, ಮಾಯಾನು ಹೊರಟೋಗುತ್ತೆ. Now which kind of maya are we talking about? The Mahamaya. I told you the first 5 points is the gross maya, next 5 points is subtle maya, and then after that is the Mahamaya. Now all these 3 mayas are now gone. What is remaining? The remaining is the one at the center, near the center, that is Adi Maya, which comes later on. We'll talk about it. So is the case of egoism. Further on, everything loses its charm. Run is still there till the run itself ends, and further on, it changes in form. This stage is attainable after thousands of years of labor and toil, but the onward march is only possible when a capable guide or master is available. Whosoever has got such a Sadguru traverses every knot and finally reaches the shores of the infinite ocean, which is the ultimate limit of knowledge. So this you can underline. What is the ultimate limit of knowledge? It is the shores of the infinite ocean. My only urge to the people in general is that they must try to judge themselves in the light of this version. Only they will have a clear understanding of what true knowledge is and where it ceases to function. Its function ends where its experience are over and the condition becomes like that of the innocent child who knows nothing. Thus, our actual condition when we arrive at the shores of this is our actual condition when we arrive at the shores of the infinite ocean. This state falls in the sphere of knowledgelessness, and this alone is the actual condition of real knowledge and the final stage of it. So 13th point, we enter into the state of real condition or the real knowledge, which is a stage of knowledgelessness or actual condition of real knowledge. Where do we get that? When we reach the shores of the infinite ocean. So how do we reach the shores of the infinite ocean? After crossing the 7 rings of splendor. That's how it happens. Okay. Now he's talking about the final state. Any questions from these 2-3 knots? 11th, 12th, and 13th. ಯಾರಿಗಾರು ಪ್ರಶ್ನೆ ಇಲ್ವಾ? ಇಲ್ಲದಿದ್ರೆ ಮುಂದಕ್ಕೆ ಹೋಗೋಣ. ಸರಿನಾ? The final state. But dear brethren, all that has been talked about so far is not yet the end. We have to move further still, but now without the support of the knowledge. This knowledgelessness alone, which I have termed as ignorance, is now ours, and which is refined state will lead us to the ultimate goal. Nothing else can be capable of it. All the states and conditions of identicality and closeness are now over. Knowledgelessness has now developed in us, and it is but proper for a man of knowledge shall never plunge into the ocean, because he knows that the moment he does so, his life shall be nowhere. That means he possesses that much of understanding. It is only our gnana heenata or knowledgelessness that has at last launched us into the fathomless ocean. When we had plunged in, our eagerness for the end began to develop. Now we go on with it with this very thought. No boat is available because it has already sunk before we reach this place. Now there is nothing but going on, and we swim on and on, covering leagues after leagues. It is but certain that in the course of our voyage now, we come across numerous ripples, folds and rickles, but all of them are quite silent and inactive, except for a faint impression of their being. These are the 7 rings that he is talking about now. We come across numerous ripples, folds and wrinkles. All of them are silent and almost inactive, with faint impression of their being. We proceed on with it till at last that impression also fades away, as it finally must, and the surface becomes quite smooth, without any folds and wrinkles. The 7 rings of the central region, as explained in the efficacy of Raja Yoga, refer to this very condition. Just as a man who has been traveling long sometimes comes to a state in which he forgets his tiredness, an empirical point which can be verified by experience, so does our Gnanam Hinata, which has now brought us to the verge of the ocean, also wear away from our thought, and we become quite extinct. But we have to go on still further. So we had the knowledge, now we have the awareness that we have no knowledge. So we are aware that we are knowledgeless. But even that now fades away. Our Gnanahita too has now come to an end. The next stage that develops through more appropriate is it cannot be called to have developed, but can be expressed as a state of tam. No light, no darkness. This is what takes us along, and there is no end to it. We may go on and on, but this will remain with us forever, the state of tam. If there is a great soul of caliber who may be able to comprehend what lies beyond, he may be able to discover that there is a point rather than a ring there. The conception of a ring around the center is indispensable. Such a one as is capable of having an experience of the central point is very rarely born. Still, let me reveal something about it. Suppose there is such a great soul in existence who wishes to discover what exists within and tries to peep into the ring around with all the powers of nature originate, then he is pushed back from it. Anyhow, if after undergoing all shocks, he is finally able to come out, make out something of it, then words fail to express it. This is the final limit of human approach, and none so far have been able to go beyond. And for the future, let alone conjecture if they can, let others conjecture if they can. Advancement even up to this point is well nigh impossible. Now he is now talking about the 7 rings of splendor. What are the 7 rings? They are the concentrated essence of power, which originates from the central ring, up to which access is almost impossible. Still, let me, however, lay down the means for it. They are quite simple and easy. When the thought of jumping up arises in his heart, and it gets itself linked with the ring, now if he picks up the courage to merge his thought into the ring, but with a careful precaution that he must keep a close watch upon his heart, let it might burst open, he may then be able to have some glimpse of it, but only for a few seconds, after which he shall have to get back. This is exactly what Babuji did. So what he is now writing here is exactly what he tried. I have thus laid down the method, and it is now up to others to dare if they like. So he is now basically telling you that these are the things that happen there and how to enter the ring, what he is now calling as the ring. Another important feature of spirituality is the special will. Probably very few may be aware of its full significance. When it is applied from a very high level of spiritual advancement, its effect is sure beyond doubt. So it's called as unfailing will. The higher we stabilize in our spiritual condition, and from there if we apply the will, it becomes unfailing. It must also be borne in mind that it works freely up to the point or not which it has hits upon. And if it's fixed beyond the 7 rings of the central region, it is quite unfailing, and the effect there still definitely comes to light in due course. It can even stop the motion of the stars and planets and counteract their effect. Their infallibility of will is in fact the real interpretation of the characteristic feature of Brahmagati, or the state of Brahman, which has been represented in so many diverse ways in our scriptures. What is Brahmagati? Brahmagati is the infallibility of the will, or unfailing will. So any person who has developed this unfailing will can be said to be established in a state of Brahmagati. Here I have given so much, though, yet it beggars description only for the avowed saints, to help them form a correct estimate of themselves. It is also but certain that such a personality never comes off and on, that he uses this special will only in matters of spiritual nature and never elsewhere. What is this special will? It is that which admits of no doubt or misgivings. So this is an examination question. What is Brahmagati? Brahmagati is that state of unfailing will. But what is special will or unfailing will? It is that which admits of no doubts or misgivings. The negative phase being quite out of imagination, that alone which is to be remains inside. Confidence grows so strong that nothing contrary to that ever stands in the way. Of course, there are some brave souls in whom it develops right from the beginning, but in that case, it works only within its own sphere and not in the higher ones. So, the thing to understand is as we move from one point to another point, our will becomes more stronger and stronger. That's all we have to understand. As we move from one point to another point, our will becomes stronger and stronger. But if it's stronger at the second point, it is stronger to whatever you can expect or experience from the second point. It cannot work at the higher point, the third point. But when we reach the center and we develop the special will, it works across all the points. That is why it is said to be the state of Brahmagati or unfailing will or special will. I now reveal the mystery so that people may try for it. In all matters, whether worldly or spiritual, a man should make use of it and try to avoid harboring thoughts of failure or disappointment. Though in fact it relates exclusively to spirituality, yet it does not mean that this science should not be utilized for worldly purposes also. For a spiritual man, of course, the use of it is of course indispensable and he can utilize it whenever he likes. While discussing the various aspects of knowledge, I have thrown some light on the science of matter too. But that is only in a way that it can be followed after deep study. The powers of creation and destruction are both present in nature. Wherever the power of creation exists, there also exists the power of destruction along with it. There is something like a dot or a grain in the center of the first knot related above. In our spiritual pursuit, we take up this very point or dot from which, as from a nucleus, thin fibers shoot out, forming a sort of cobweb. We merge ourselves into this point and the nucleus to emerge forth into the state of identicality. I have also stated that where Bhuma is, in whatever state it is, there is a ring round about it, which to make it more comprehensible may be said to be a sphere of light or power, which allows none to stay within. So that ring that he is talking about around the center is the ring of light or power, the sphere of light or power. Now there is one point which is not very clear, that is, he's talking about a dot or a grain in the center of the first knot related above. Now he has not talked about which first knot that he is talking about, whether he's talking about the first knot or he's talking about the center with the dot in the center, the central C with the dot in the center. So from the way that he has described it, it is quite likely to be the first knot, the first point in the heart. In our spiritual pursuit, we take this very first knot, from which which forms a nucleus from which thin fibers come out, forming a sort of cobweb. The same is exactly true about this nucleus too. It also has a ring or circle around it, but it is not so powerful as so as to prevent anyone from probing into it. The ring possesses all the destructive powers and create a state of destruction within its own range. That is, it can be used in making or marring any of the material objects of the world. It was this very power which Hanumanji made use of for attracting the gas in the Indian Ocean to set Ceylon on fire. The ordinary process for applying such destructive element is to draw them by the will force and to locate them on the particular spot to effect the desired results. It is possible to cast the force of the ring upon some distant part with the result that it may be reduced to ashes. But if it is used for some good purpose, it can create a state of light like that which Moses saw on the mountain. In this way, both good and bad results can be brought about by it. But as a yogi always aims at the good, he never uses it for adverse results, save it especially in ordered circumstance. Similar is the case with all the following knots. So he's now talking about every knot. In every knot, there is a center, there is a dot in the center, and from that dot, which is the nucleus, some fibers keep jutting out. It's like a cobweb. Now, if that force of that particular dot is focused on any one particular thing, then it can either burn it off to ashes or it can shatter that particular thing. It can be used for destructive purpose also, constructive purpose also. But generally, in our system, most of the abhyasis and preceptors are not made aware of this dot in the center of each of the knot. So just remember that. So there are quite a few more things to discuss in the final state. Let me finish and then we can take some questions. I am also bringing to light another mystery. We have been saying that out of devotion that there is providence in the fall of the sparrow and not a leaf trembles without the divine will. And that is a fact too. But if I say that God too does not move without the will of his devotee, I do not know what the whereabouts of the saints might think of me. But this is a fact beyond doubt, a fact which should be declared in order to reveal reality. For myself, I may say that since I started practice at the feet of my master, Samarth Guru Sri Ramchandraji Maharaj Fatehgar, I have taken him to be my all in all, and may this feeling of mine continue forever. It was he who brought me deliverance, so I remained unattached with everyone else. Now again, I come to the point. God, taken in the sense of center or bhuma, does not possess mind or manas. Had it, the law of karma or action would have applied to him as well, and he would have been in the world like us. Mind or manas is an instrument which he has bestowed upon man. A part of it is with us, and the other end exactly extends nearly up to him. Our attention is towards both of them. With the former, we attend to our worldly affairs, while with the later, we connect to the divine. When we connect the former with the later, and the same one current begins to flow all through, for this we have to practice, so that a throb in the later may begin to resound in the former, the human mind. So that's exactly what happens. In other words, the saints who have entered into the central region align themselves with the first mind of God. So what then happens is, whatever happens to flow in the first mind of God, the saint is able to pick up by vibrations. Now, imagine what the condition of a man would be when, after making his art like this, he hits into the central region and crosses the 7 rings of Kenta to acquire swimming in the infinite ocean. He shall definitely be nearmost to Bhuma, and further on, if contact is developed, which is nothing but the state of merging in the Bhuma, then everything is accomplished and all his activities in the spiritual field comes to an end. Whatsoever little remains may be beyond the scope of grasp of imagination. The life which is acquired after this final merging is the real life, which is attainable only after complete negation of the self. Now, if we dissolve that, the life which would then be a refined existence, and if that too is merged, then whatever remains would be the real. Words fail to picture that which comes after the ultimate merging of that large state. At this level, there remains but a nominal difference between God and man and Bhuma. Further on, the next condition is when the conception of the Bhuma is thoroughly vivified. Nothing beyond it can be said, though thought goes on further still, and to end, no end can be traced out. When we arrive at the final condition and begin receiving commands, our understanding fails to decide as to where from they are coming. When this condition dawns, he must realize that we have arrived at the state where it can be rightly presumed that God does not move until moved by the devotee. When we enter this ultimate state, we are in the state of oneness with God. This is in fact the real sphere of Advaita. Though, if consciousness of it remains, duality has not yet forsaken in its true sense. In other words, the ultimate changeless state has not been fordawned. As a matter of fact, it's a place where the feelings of both duality and non-duality become extinct. In the words of poet, it can be translated as, I have turned into you, I become the body, and you the life in it, so none can henceforth say that I and you are apart from each other. When we settle down in it, having merged up to the last point, what do we achieve thereby? I will simply say that all powers originating from below the center come to us, and an abhyasi at this state of attainment can do all that the nature does. All the forces of nature acts under his command, and he supplies power to them to keep the power of nature going. The sacred books often contain references to the effect that at times the different gods received power through different yagnas to bring out the desired results. But such methods are adopted only by those who abide in the sphere of duality. But all that is in an abhyasi who is forgetful of his state of non-duality is the reality of the real. He has power even to shorten the span of existence or affect whatever change he would like. His will shall work in all matters, though it may take time. The manifestation too has been a very long process covering a period of about 1,20,000 years time when judged through deep concentration from the level of highest superconsciousness. Though there was only one shock in the region of the power just below the Bhuma, yet the manifestation of the effect thereof and the accumulation of the necessary material for the purpose took the entire period mentioned above. For the interest of the readers, I may also say that the momentum of all the creative activities was clockwise. If it is now to be turned anti-clockwise, the universe will begin to dissolve. The sun and the moon will begin to lose their light, and the span of the earth's existence will be reduced. Now again, the border ring around the center, as I have said before, does not allow anyone to cross over it. Yet, if there is one who is so highly specialized so as to be capable of forcing a few seconds peep into it, he can bring the entire existence to naught if by the force of his will he fixes around a ring a living thought of ending the universe and diverts his energy towards the central region. It will then combine with the central energy, creating vibrations which, when expanded, will force its descent downwards. Now, the greater the force generated, the stronger will in its be action. Another method for it would be to reverse the downward flow of the powers towards the center by the force of the will. By doing so, the momentum itself will turn anti-clockwise and the effect of the will shall quicken the process. On the other hand, if he only locates his will on the ring around the center, then it will come into effect slowly. Anyway, now Babaji is talking about how we can actually bring to an end to the creation. So none of it we need to worry about. This entire paragraph is about that. Don't worry about it. When things stand so, none can perhaps have a true estimate of the man's inner power, though I have hinted everything in a very guarded manner. If one having progressed up to that extent wants to effect any remarkable change in nature, the method would be quite simple and unfailing. For hardly would there be anything too far from him. The method would be to join his own thought to real state in such a way that there would be no words in it, but only a suggestion to express his purpose. The same thing will then set to work for the accomplishment of the task, and that would be the divine command as well. But this will happen only when as we stated above, the contact with the Bhuma is so established that the thing existing in the heart may be resounding there, just like the other end of the wire, which begins to vibrate by the effect of the touch at one end. So in other words, the essence is the higher we go, the more unfailing our will becomes, and we can do a lot of things just with the use of suggestion. Because our suggestion is aligned with the highest level of the willpower, and it will surely manifest in due course of time. When a devotee attains this stage, he no longer remains a supplicant in the strict sense. Through his humble supplications, though his humble supplications persist still, as duly they must. Really, it is only on account of his great gentleness of character that the relation which has brought him up to this is maintained all through. In accordance with this, he receives commands for the work required for the world. His own position in this respect is practically nil. He is in a way only part the Bhuma only. This condition does not fall to anyone's lot except on rare occasions when nature wants overhauling of the world or the universe. There can never be two personalities of this character at the same time in the world. There shall be one and only one such personality in all the universe at a time. And that too only when nature is in need of it. I have now dealt with the different conditions of knowledge up to the last. If we try to express it more appropriately, the word knowledge would be far too inadequate. Let aspirants try to reach up to the point. It is just likely that there may be something beyond the two, but that's only a suggestion for posterity, and those who are in the present may also ponder over it. So I'll just stop here. Any questions we can take? In the final state again, they'll probably ask about Brahmagati. What they'll probably ask about unfailing will. They'll ask about the infinite shores of ocean. These are the questions that they generally ask from this final chapter. And the issues about the utilizing the will with suggestion, then about bringing the creation to a knot, all these things are unnecessary for the examination point of view. Babuji has given different methods of how this can be accomplished, but this is not something that's going to come into you for the exams.
Brother,
Yeah,
God
go ahead.
does not move till moved by the devotee. What does it mean?
Alright, that's exactly what as Babuji explained till now. That's what we read.
Okay.
God has no mind. So if God has to be moved, it's only the mind of the devotee which can move the God. So when the mind of the devotee creates intense craving in the heart, there is craving in the heart that resonates in the bhuma. And the bhuma just responds back. That's all. That is what it means, that God cannot move without the devotee's mind, because God does not have a mind of his own. Only if the devotee uses his mind, then he can make the God move. This is one of the ultimate conditions that we develop when we become closely aligned to the bhuma. When we become closely aligned to the bhuma, all the powers of the nature also come under our control, and we can utilize it in whichever way we want. So if you remember, we spoke about the center and we spoke about the latent motion. Now we have gone beyond the latent motion and established our contact with the center. So that is the sphere of the Advaita, and Babuji says we also lose awareness of that Advaita. So we get established in the state of oneness in Bhuma in such a way that we are no longer aware of duality or non-duality. That is what happens. Initially, when we become aligned to the center, we start feeling that we are one. But eventually, that awareness of that oneness also is gone. Then you cannot say it is Advaita. You can say Advaita when there is a feeling of oneness. But when you say that the feeling of oneness is also gone, where is the question of Advaita there? So that is also gone. So that's why Babuji says this state is beyond the state of duality and non-duality.
Thank you, brother.
As we proceed higher and higher in our practice, it becomes easier for us to grasp. Only thing we would request you to do is not to scratch too much of your head if you are not able to grasp the subtle points, not to worry about it. As we proceed in our practice and become more and more subtle, some of these points becomes easily graspable. That's all. So just remember that. If you can pick up some important points which are necessary for the exam, that's okay. But beyond that, you can keep this book and then read again after 1 or 2 years. By that time, your sensitivity and subtlety would have changed. By that time, your ability to grasp it will also be a bit more. So we can explain all these things, but it's only going to take some time and might not be useful for the exam. That's the reason why I'm not going into the detail. We can go page by page and we can actually draw a figure and then explain to you what exactly happens. But that might not be necessary now. Okay. Now, there are 2 appendixes. We'll just finish it off and that will complete towards infinity. So I'll just request brother to, I've already requested brother to send the questions about towards infinity. So he's at it. So you can utilize it for your journey. At the time when there was only the absolute and no creation, the question of time did not arise at all. When the thoughts of creation got enlivened in the base, it was perfectly free from everything. It proceeded on and due to the effect of the motion, got transformed into power with its tendency directed towards action. But for the action, it must naturally stand in need of a field or base. Now the brief pause intervening between the original thought and the subsequent being, or in other words, between the cause and the effect, was already there. This can appropriately be interpreted as duration or time, and it served as the field for the action. This time, having merged into power, God transformed himself into power for further action towards creation. So there is not just time, there is time and power. As a general rule, a thought, when it becomes deep, brings into effect something like a pause, which has a tremendous force. In the case of the center, the question of depth does not arise at all because of the perfect tranquility, uniformity there. The idea of velocity of the force, the direct action of the mind, was also absent there, since the center or the ultimate Brahm, though absolute, did not possess the mind. Thus, whatever existed between the thought and the action was power, which is termed as time. So, Babu is trying to explain about the time. The same power we too have got in our share, but in accordance with our limited approach. or capacity. Now, in order to utilize this power, we have to merge it in the greater power of the center, which is all and absolute. There is nothing in the world, not even the megaton bomb of modern science, to match this great power. Modern science may not yet have realized its full significance, though even if it had, it would have utilized it for the destructive purpose only. The power can, however, be brought down to earth and utilized in the work by the exercise of strong willpower. A yogi who is at the highest level of ascent is, however, with it consciously or unconsciously. To my view, the science of physics cannot be taken to be complete without the full knowledge of this great power, which is in fact the root of all powers. The root of all powers is the time that Babuji is now talking about. So the first paragraph, whatever existed between the thought and the action was power, and that is called as time. Appendix 2. Ignorance and knowledge are the two extremities of the same thing. Up to a certain point, it is termed as ignorance. After that, it turns into knowledge. There are two poles of the magnet. Thus, avidya has no existence without vidya, and vidya has no existence without avidya. If one is there, the other must also be there. That means that when the wheel of ignorance is torn off, avidya, vidya both are gone. Thus, avidya covers the entire sphere included in both avidya and vidya. This is the state of tam, which is beyond both. It is in the true sense the state of realization where it is neither avidya or vidya. What is it there then? Neither of the two. A state of perfect latency, not knowingness, or complete knowledgelessness, which may roughly be denoted as a state of ignorance, just as it is at the age of infancy. Ignorance is in fact the highest pitch of knowledge. That comes to mean that we start from the level of ignorance and finally end in a state of higher ignorance or complete ignorance, as I call it. The sphere of knowledge lies only in the intermediate stage. Really, as far as it is the sphere of knowledge, it's all ignorance in the true sense. Can that which dawns after the wheel of ignorance is torn off even ever be expressed as knowledge? Certainly not, though one does not call it so in the same outer sense, taking into view the two opposites. Does it cover the sense of knowledge? No. Knowledge implies awareness of that which is beyond self. Realizations means merging or oneness with the absolute. So underline these two lines. Knowledge implies the awareness of that which is beyond the self. That is still knowledge. Realizations means merging or oneness with the absolute or the reality. In the case of in that case, no question of knowledge can ever arise. What then may be it called knowledgelessness, not knowingness, ignorance, or whatsoever. In short, it may something be like that, though it may well nigh be impossible to express in words. Complete ignorance, I have put it, may however be the nearest to appropriateness. One on the divine path is supposed to be marching from light to darkness to light. Let darkness be avidya and light be vidya. Sahaj does not have light for its goal. It is but an intermediate stage which we have to pass through during our march to the ultimate, which is neither light nor darkness, but beyond both. Thus do we start from the avidya, pass through the vidya, on to that which is avidya, not vidya, but beyond both. Neither avidya nor vidya, but beyond both. What word can denote that exact sense of that which is neither light or darkness, or which is neither avidya and vidya? Is there any word for that in the world vocabulary? None, for sure. Let it therefore be, as I say, complete ignorance, difference premise, crudest state of preliminary ignorance. So we start from ignorance and we end up in complete ignorance. That's what Babuji is writing, and that is the final stage. And at that stage, we have established ourselves in the state of tam. So the state of tam is one thing. That is also a question that you might get in the exam. So please keep hold of that too. Okay. So I shall end it here. I know that we had to kind of rush through a bit of the later points. The only reason for that is that it is very unlikely that you will ever get questions much from that. You might get some questions from the final state, which is the Brahmagati, those things. But beyond the 7th point, the main points that we have underlined, that is enough. There is no need to kind of remember everything from the other points. If you know what is where in those knots, that is okay. You can look at the book and write. Nothing to worry. You will not be asked very intricate questions in the exam, so not to worry. Okay, please keep that in mind. More or less, if they are going to ask any questions from the final state or the 13 point, any higher points, it will be more straightforward directly from the book. They would have picked out the sentence directly from the book, so there is no confusion for it. Okay. Okay, then. So we have completed this. So we still have few chapters of the Sahajmarg philosophy and the efficacy of Raja Yoga still there. So I hope that we can finish it by next Sunday. Next Sunday, I'm not there. So we would have to probably finish it by next Saturday. In other words, if we take tomorrow also into account, we have 7 days. Within the next 7 days, we have to finish it. So we have to go in accordance with that particular pace. So please remember that. I know that I have not actually had the opportunity to answer all the questions that you probably might have, but we will get an opportunity to do so in due course of time. But in the keeping the focus on the exams in mind, we have not focused too much on those questions as of now, but we will be more than happy to spend more time with you after the exams are over to go through some of these intricate points in more detail at leisure, so that we will all have more time to ponder on what Babuji has described there. Okay. So with these sentences, what I will do is I'll just